Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Becky Metcalf, and on behalf of Design Centre Chelsea Harbour, a very warm welcome to London Design Week. A bit of housekeeping first. If I could ask you to turn your phones off, that would be brilliant. Well, we really are in for a treat. We've got a starry panel of interior designers, Nicola Harding, Adam Bray, and Lucy Hammond-Giles, and they're going to share their inside secrets, so pin your ears back. I can't think of anyone better to talk to them than editor of House and Garden Hatter Bing. Across all their platforms, whether it's a printed magazine or what they do on digital, they really do have the most beautiful interiors featured. I think we should give them all a very warm welcome.
Can we clap? Thank you, Becky. I just disappeared off around the corner. And welcome, everybody. I'm thrilled to be sitting here with three designers whose work, we feature in the magazine often, but also whose work I greatly admire. And achieving sophisticated interiors that sort of stand the test of time, yet are sort of comfortable, full of character, interesting, is no mean feat, and yet they seem to do it with seeming ease. So I'm hoping, like I imagine all of you, that we're going to glean some insight today. Who am I going to start with? One of the things the sort of word timeless or timeless interiors are sort of, in a way, has connotations of being boring, but I think it's also quite important. I think, Adam, is timelessness something that you strive for in your interiors?
Hi. Yes, I mean, it's not like going shopping for a pair of jeans you're going to wear for, 6 months.
Yeah, you can't go off it.
No, you can't go off it. So, we try and build in something that feels relevant to the time, relevant to the clients, and suits the building,
Yeah.
And feels sort of just classic enough without feeling, again,
Yes.
this type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of, how do you ensure, though, what are the things that you would focus on to kind of get the sense of timelessness, I suppose?
I think what we like to do is always have something quite contemporary in. Most of our rooms are built around antiques and quite simple colours, I think. You can see some things here where, there's some... Oh, it's gone. But it was a very nice 18th century table and some chairs. And this is all sort of very characteristic of things that we do that I hope feels very sort of timeless. It's quite... We've got antiques from the 1930s, from the again, this is complicated, but yeah, just try and mix everything up a little bit, and just reflect the time, and more importantly, just what the client, the people who have to live with it after I've gone home and had a glass of wine and a cry.
And I suppose there's a sort of sense of a certain timelessness in comfort and making sure you have that it is comfortable.
So there's a real investment in the making of things properly that people can move with, they can take on to other houses, other places. That sort of thing's very important, I think, and that adds to the sense of something very solid, as opposed to something. It's nice to have something that's very solid and with elements of playfulness as well, so it doesn't get boring.
Yeah, but are there? I mean, perhaps. Nicola, you could answer this. Are there things that you sort of end up feeling equally as sort of two of the moment, and you end up having avoid, or does that not matter if something's?
I think there are things that sort of crop up, like at the moment, maybe one too many bubbles and one too many scallops is a little bit scary, but I think if that's done with a sense of fun, like you said, Adam, and you're not trying to be too clever or take yourself too seriously, then you know, why not if they put a smile on your face?
Yeah.
And that's a sort of nod, but just like not across the whole scheme. And I think to what you were saying, it's sort of having a foot in yesterday and a foot in tomorrow, so that it's not easy to date when it's, you know, it's not all slavishly from one period. Then that perhaps helps it last.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, makes it last, but also gives a sense of getting away from a sense of the sort of dull. I was suggesting that timelessness gives the sort of connotations of dull, but it's the mix, I presume, that in a way gives the edge, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the unexpected if it's not too predictable, because if all the pieces come from the same period, all the colours exactly match the period of the furniture, then it does feel a bit predictable and boring. But if you can sort of twist that.
I suppose you need balance, don't you?
Yeah.
So you have the new and the old, and that gives you the timelessness.
And what would you, Lucy, tend to be? What is the new usually in a?
The new, I suppose, the client is always the new for us, is because they will be bringing ideas or their own furniture that feels kind of new in one way. But we quite often use new sofas if we can't find the antique sofas that fit, or we'd use new tables if we can't find things to fit.
Yeah.
But
So there's not a particular sort of go-to to give a sort of modern edge. It's not always the lamps that you would, or I don't know. I'm just
no, it's whatever's missing and you can't find.
and that.
I think we all use antiques a lot.
Yeah, and it's hard to predict what you'll find with antiques.
If your patience runs out, or the client's patience run out, then you need to fill the gap with something new. But you would also choose something new to get that balance.
And sometimes it can be the other way around, because especially now the workshops are so stacked that to have something new, if it's made to order, you know, there's sort of 6 to 18 month lead time. So actually popping something old
It's easier.
that's available like that is a better, easier, quicker fix.
And you got a happy client.
And can be less expensive.
And
to get antiques.
and more distinctive.
Yes.
Full of character.
But then if you've designed something from scratch, that could be pretty distinctive too. Would you do that?
Yes.
Especially
I mean,
if you
there are
design it.
things that we design. There's things that we design that we have to, you know, like everyone has so many clothes now.
Yeah.
That you know, antique wardrobes really
Yeah, I'm not gonna.
doesn't really do the trick. I don't know if you find that. So it's okay in guest rooms or in maybe in children's rooms, but in family rooms, we end up doing things like that, and purely out of practicality, not out of choice, really. Upholstery, we tend to do mostly new.
But you might be following a sort of traditional shape.
Oh, very much, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
you can see here, that's something that we did in a sort of library, in a flat in Belgravia, and that's a bed. But that was a model sort of copied from a sort of 60s thing, you know?
Yeah.
So I think upholstery more than anything is one of those things where the shapes, really good shapes, stay for a long, long time.
That looks quite new. What was that screen?
That screen's from the 70s.
beautiful.
It was great. Italian, yeah. Anyway, but thanks. It's actually a vet. But and lighting as well. I think lighting's become, you know, antique lighting's a very hard thing to find enough of in a substantial project. I think
within the period that you are required to find.
So
The time period,
Yes,
your search
your
period.
deadline.
Yes. Yeah.
And where you need multiples, sort of finding that. But then sometimes, finding a piece to mix in, or designing something that fits with a run of something antique. Work well.
Yeah. And how, and Nicola, in your work, do you feel, is originality something that you're, striving for? Is it important? Maybe it's different between whether you're designing a hotel or a house, because maybe, I don't know what.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think designers can fall down by trying to be too clever and too original. And so, you know, your point, Lucy, about it coming from the client, you know, so much is led by them, and, each client's very different, their stories. So, you know, I think when we're responding to them, it sort of naturally takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think sometimes sort of overthinking things can be a pitfall.
What are the sort of things that keep you up at night? I mean, what would you suddenly have?
How long have you got?
No. What I meant was what might other sort of suddenly you would think, oh gosh, yes, we've got to do that, and that's an exciting thing. Is that happen, or maybe it doesn't happen like that because you're?
I think things that keep me up at night that I've learned over time is actually sort of to hold your course. You know, things that you sort of panic about in the moment, which quite often is a paint colour. It goes up on the wall and sort of like moment of terror. Actually, when everything's gone in, it takes on a very different feel. And if you can keep the courage of your convictions, of those things that sort of seemed right on the page and speaking with the client,
Yeah, the paint colour is a big thing, isn't it? It looks very different when it's just paint as opposed to all the layers of everything else.
That's it, and you're sort of managing your own anxiety as well as everybody else around you.
And it is difficult because all those paint shots are surrounded by white, and it's scary looking at that.
And there's no, I mean, well, I don't know. I've still haven't worked out a sort of way. Everybody says, you know, don't paint them straight on the wall, paint a card like this, but you're still kind of wandering around looking a bit, feeling a bit like...
and look through your telescope like that.
Yeah, especially in lockdown where we couldn't get hold of samples and we couldn't paint everything up. So, you know, between us, you know, Beaverbrook Townhouse was all done off these tiny little sort of squares, thinking, I'm sure that's going to be okay.
and was it generally okay? I haven't touched.
We didn't repaint anything.
No, so that's a good sign.
But also, if it all goes together on your board, then you know it will work in the big scale as well.
Yeah.
And
the little bit of uncertainty, hopefully, actually all adds to it. You know, the sort of that they might kind of react with each other in a different way to how you totally imagine.
Actually, I really enjoy that sort of not working too well. You know, like it's sort of being a little bit clashy and unexpected. More real and not too predictable. And maybe that answers your question about it. Yeah, being timeless or being fresh. You know, what gives it the twist is perhaps it not.
It's a little bit wrong.
Yes, a little bit or a lot.
You're not
bit
trying
wrong.
to create a particular look, and it's got to look like this kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not all really matchy because that makes it much easier to look after going forward, because then if something filters in, something breaks and is replaced or moves to another room, then it's not going to look like you've sort of jarred it.
And Lucy, when you start, I mean, we've been talking all about these things, but it's still the sort of feeling when you first walk into a project or first buy a house and you'll start embarking on the process. Where do you start in terms of, particularly, obviously you probably start with getting the rooms in the right, you know, but then the sort of decorative kind of scheme or not scheme, but
I always start with a room plan. Always. I think you start with a lovely. You make people have drawings. Have to have drawings, and then you do your furniture layout. You start very practically without. I mean, it's you come very late to the schemes and the colour. Very much practical, and asking what your clients have got, because they will. It's very rare that you'll have someone with nothing. You probably have that more with hotels, but you know, I've hardly ever had people where you get everything new.
Yeah.
So you do your floor plan, and then you start. I find talking to the person and being in the room and being in the house, you get a feeling for what they like, and then you take the thing that you like too, and then you work around that. And you might not end up using that one thing that you started with, but you just need to start, and then keep going.
So is it? And does it start therefore with a sort of fabric or reference points?
And it's literally anything.
Anything.
It can be anything. So some people, I've had clients give me postcards with portraits of 15th century portraits, and she said, I like these colours. And actually, I don't think the room was anything like that. But it doesn't matter where you start. Just get on with it.
Where do you agree? Where do you start, Adam?
Yeah, I mean, you have to nail what we call the general arrangement. You have to know what and then things suggest themselves. It's kind of spooky. Something that you might have thought might work in that house. It's like, oh God, maybe we should offer it to them instead because it's going to be really great there. I think traditionally decorators used to work with the carpet in traditional old-fashioned decorating with antiques. You put the carpet down. You choose
that's
the
what Robert
carpets.
Keim always says.
Yeah, you choose the carpets, and there was when I first started, when I was in my teens, and I used to sort of obsessively read and buy. Sorry, Architectural Digest, because it had these extraordinary American rooms. There were adverts in there from a dealer called Doris Blau, who was a carpet dealer on Madison Avenue, and she always said the carpet is the soul of the apartment. And I think it's a very hard thing to put the carpet in at the end, to get the carpet right once you've done your Ikat lampshades.
Yeah. But for any of us sort of not doing it on a regular basis, I find it, I would never think of I would never
Well,
think.
it's a terrifying thing because often it's one of the punchiest things in the room financially.
Yeah.
And
And
so
it
it's a
feels
very
like a
hard
luxury.
sell to say to someone, can you spend a quarter of the budget on this? Don't worry about the rest.
We'll figure it out.
Figure it out. Come along for the ride, it'll be good.
And then I'd be thinking, gosh, well, we're just all going to spill things all over it.
Yeah, well, that's a big problem. Spills
That's why you need a patterned carpet.
spills and dogs.
Yeah.
I start with colour. I start with
Getting it,
sort of thinking about what the room is going to be used for and that general arrangement, but how it wants to feel, the sort of mood of it, and what the sort of natural existing resources are, how big it is, how much light it is, and then that informs sort of what colour it might be, and then the rest flows from that.
Yeah, because then you start to get a sense of how a house will feel from room to room, presumably.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and so when you're choosing colours, are you then looking? How do you then kind of go from room to room? Are you sort of looking at contrast, and how would you get the flow?
Yeah, I think contrast is a really big thing. It's kind of how the colours relate to each other as much as the colour in itself. So, when a room wants to feel more dynamic and lively, then a high degree of contrast. But if it wants to feel really calm, then, much less contrast. In terms of how the rooms relate to each other, different rooms relate to each other. I think having notes that sort of follow through and tie it together is good and creates a sort of harmony. But for me, I'd rather not be sort of slavish to that. There needs to be at least a couple of rooms that sort of totally break the rules and have an element of surprise to them.
Yeah.
Do you have rules with colour, Adam?
No, but what I do try and do is to go to the house at different times of the day. Normally, we have site meetings tend to be quite early in the morning, and things can look very, very different. And it's going to look at a project in the evening when the builders aren't there, and you can just have a little wander about at dusk, makes a massive difference. And you begin to think about the light levels in the rooms and how dark you can make them. Yeah. Or how dark, which is always temptation.
Yeah. So you like dark. Your natural kind of dark. Yes.
No, I mean, I don't know. It's colour. That's a different thing. It's a different conversation. But it's a funny thing. Colour. It's so specific to the orientation of the house. That the type of people, their age. Yeah. It's complex.
Their art.
It's
really,
so
and
much
what they
to
want
do
to
with
use the
what they
room
own
for.
And what sort of pictures they have and how they see themselves. And it's a very different thing. So
it is extraordinary how different the same colour can look in different rooms.
And also in different parts of the
buildings.
country. We did a house right in the north of Scotland, and I took up a load of colours that we would normally use in London in a very sort of naive way, and sent them up. And when we went up to look at the trial, it was a disaster. And as you go further north, that's why the American paint colours look a bit spooky.
Extraordinary.
They look a bit wrong. As you go further north, you can have stronger colours. The light's different. It's sort of lower.
But then I find it's also quite different when you turn the lights on. I can never quite work out because
don't.
that's a whole other thing to deal with. Well, you don't bother about that.
Candles only.
Yeah, because it completely changes the colour, doesn't it?
I know, and getting the right light bulbs actually, is so important because, if you don't have the right light bulbs, then the colours can be really quite alarming.
Yeah.
I do think you will disagree that it is nicer to have small rooms dark, because I think big dark rooms can be quite a bit too contrasty.
I don't know, it depends what you're doing. I mean, in the nicest possible way. I mean, no, I agree. I like
a small dark room, preferably with a bar in it.
There, that's one of your rooms, that kitchen.
Yes,
it's nice and big and light.
Very, very bright room. No, but it depends who you're working for. You're just.
Yeah.
And like you say, the art, because actually if there's an incredible art collection with big pieces on really dark walls, that can look incredible. And if the canvas, if the pieces have got a lightness to them, then that brings the lightness into the room, and the paint colour doesn't need to play that game.
And how you handle the lighting of all of that stuff. And there's so much texture on walls now. I don't know. I mean, painting walls now seems a bit, right now it feels a bit, there's so many
intimidating.
choices.
Yes.
It's like paint. It's going to be hard.
Well, it's not only the amount of colours, but it's then also the finish, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
we're using quite a lot of fresco, sort of lime wash finish at the moment, which we're having quite a lot of fun with. Maybe we're overcooking it.
No, it's a lovely softness about that. It's and lime wash. It's so beautiful and so kind of graceful.
And quite forgiving as well, unlike gloss, which shows up every lump and bump. Bit of lime wash.
Don't need to
forgiving.
replaster.
Yeah.
Just have lime wash. Yeah.
It's supposed to look like that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And Lucy, how do you like to use pattern? I mean,
Everywhere.
everywhere. Yes. But how do you start with that?
I think that's, again, almost really unprofessionally showing our clients all the patterns that we love and hoping that they will also love one of them. And then, or at least 10. And then from there, you can start using them. And it goes back to the thing about balance and contrast. And I like using a lot of pattern because it then balances out. They balance each other out.
So then you don't need the different scales of pattern, and you don't need to worry.
The different layers.
Yeah.
And I think to your point about how keeping traditional interiors feeling a bit more modern, if you use pattern on a sofa rather than as curtains, that can keep it looking a bit fresher. But yeah, I like pattern very much. You use more geometrics than...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't seem to be... I was just saying in the car on the way here that I think when I next do my next thing for myself, I'm going to have a big chintz sofa because I've never had one.
Yes, please.
I have to ask you to help me with it. I've never had one, so I thought it might be time to do that. We tend to use block plain colours.
Yeah.
And some text. I mean, mostly textured papers and patterning carpets. Patterning cushions and lampshades, but mostly plain, quite sort of blocked things.
Yeah.
Which means you can be quite timeless.
Yeah.
You can your palette can be a sort of more of a period palette or more of a contemporary palette.
Yes,
And
it's
you can
about
change
palette
the
rather
pattern.
than
Amazing,
pattern.
yes. For just for me,
Yeah,
for the moment.
Yeah. Your current phase.
Pattern's very helpful because you get so many lovely colours immediately into your room, and you can choose any one of those.
You can pull out.
Yeah, you
But
can
maybe
pull out.
it's an instinct, a sort of gut thing, isn't it? Like you showing the clients the fabrics, it's that you're then gauging what they really respond to, and maybe you either really respond to pattern, or in your case, Adam, you don't. It's not like you're not seeking pattern for a room.
I'm not pattern greedy.
No.
But like here, some old textiles on very simple colours. I mean, we did a big thing, I call it a throwdown, with a new client, someone we've never worked for, on Wednesday of last week where we take a big box full of things that we think they'll really like. And okay, what about that? What about that? And what about that? And what about that?
And you just gauge the visceral response.
exactly.
And then,
That's a great idea. I don't do that.
No.
I'm going to start doing that.
it
Well, I think with pattern, it's trying to get clients not to analyse it too closely, because when it's in the room, it's not how you experience
I know,
it
on a
when you're
little
looking at it
thing.
like that. So sort of that again, it's how the patterns relate to each other in the mix rather than on their own, and getting the balance between large and small scale, and then using things like stripes or checks that are kind of pattern without being a pattern. You've got texture and an opportunity to sort of bring in more colours, but they are quite a nice foil to something like a geometric or a floral.
Yeah. But because actually, my first job was working for an interior designer, and we presented rather than doing what you're talking about, we presented schemes, and we might give two options, and then maybe there were bits that would come in and out, but it was much more. But maybe that's quite a lot of people don't work like that
I think
anymore.
that's probably the proper way to do it.
I think it's a great idea early on in the process to get those reactions out of people.
Yeah.
It saves you a lot of time.
Yeah, I mean,
and
I
them
want-
as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
and particularly for people, this was someone I only met a couple of times and had the what she'd sent of the things of what she liked was so diverse. Like,
Where do we go with this?
who are you?
But there is so much out there, and it's
so-
very difficult. I mean, that's why
So
they're coming to you to help you.
I mean, to a degree. And so I took our reading of what she might like,
Yeah.
which was about 25% accurate. Weirdly, I was hoping for a slightly higher hit rate.
I think that sounds quite good.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. It's very interesting that.
Well, that's the thing, is that I think people don't necessarily know what they like because they don't know what's out there. They haven't seen it, and they are looking at something close up when actually when the whole room is put together, it will be quite a quiet element. So getting their reaction and then judging how big that really needs to play a part, that reaction to that piece,
And
or
you-
whether you can stretch them a little bit.
And you don't have to have those things in the room.
Yeah.
You just need somewhere to start. Maybe it's like
Yes.
you're saying about you start with colour. I think it's to get the conversation going with
I
what
look
colours
at-
people
Yeah.
like.
You know, I tend to look at how people dress and work at it on that sort of thing, which can be complicated.
And people don't always, I suppose, how we look at, don't judge people by
By the
covers.
cover.
by
Yeah.
the cover. I mean,
About it would make sense,
no, yes.
you know, but it doesn't always.
No.
We've
And also, presumably, some people are more confident about the way they dress as
Yeah,
opposed to
completely.
what their house might look like, or the other way around. Yeah.
But you tend to sort of be able to read if someone's quite minimal, you know, not many chintz sofas,
No.
or the reverse.
Yeah.
But that often helped. This was complicated.
Yeah.
Particular project.
Yeah. And what about, because I now find with sort of Instagram and everything that some fabrics, you look at them and you think, great, and then within, relatively short time, suddenly you're seeing them everywhere. How do you bother to, I mean, do you suggest you avoid that, or but one doesn't know, do you really, whether you're,
I think if you love something,
just have to go
Yeah.
with it.
then you really do have to go with it.
But once you've seen it everywhere, avoid it.
If you've gone
If
off
you
it,
still love it,
if you
then-
still love it, you're allowed it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Exactly, it's your home.
But what about you as a client designing for somebody? You mind about that, presumably.
It's quite hard to put squiggle in a scheme, which is a Sybil Colfax fabric that we might have seen quite a lot.
Yeah.
I've never used it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Are you under pressure to use it?
No.
There's not
Luckily,
email.
I still have a job.
We've noticed that you haven't been using Squiggle.
I think there are things you avoid, but not really if they're suitable for the room.
Yeah.
I think that's right. If you're doing it because it's in fashion, then I would definitely check yourself,
Yeah.
question the client. But if you're doing it because you've seen it, you love it, then I think that's great. But maybe if it's in a room full of all the other things that are like absolutely sort of top of Instagram and top of fashion, then that's sort of danger territory.
Yes, as you say, it's the odd bit like that is fine. But if the whole thing feels like a cliche, that might not be so good.
That definitely isn't timeless.
The speed at which things come into the showroom here, come into the magazines, get onto Instagram, 3 to 6 months, and then you're like, I never want to see that again. And
Print
by
is a
that,
bit
I
slower,
might have
isn't
it at that point. What?
Print is slower.
Print is slower, yes, it is, but I might have
Instagram
put
is
that
quick.
in 6 schemes.
Yeah.
Have to do a massive pullback. You don't have anymore. And then all the clients' friends are using it as well.
Yeah.
You know, that's no bad thing.
Yeah. And when you're kind of designing bespoke pieces, how do you, what sort of things? I mean, I know we've talked about the wardrobes, but when you're coming to the more sort of decorative, I see a wardrobe as quite practical, I suppose, but it's the sort of more decorative elements. How do you sort of work out where you're going to spend the money, I suppose, and the time to, what do you think?
It really depends on the client, the size of the house. You know, the size of the house plays quite a big part. If it's a small property and everything needs to work really hard, then probably does end up with more bespoke pieces so that they can fit in. But, you know, I think there's so much great stuff out there, old or new, that I don't feel a strong attachment to sort of needing to do lots of bespoke stuff. I think it's a sort of alchemy of bringing it all together. But what do you guys think?
I agree.
Well, yeah, the less of that really, the better for us. I mean, cabinetry, you know, in bathrooms and kitchens and things, But even then, I think we try and use as much sort of older things as possible. Yeah.
But then I suppose you might get a fabric kind of dyed to a special
Absolutely,
colour,
yeah,
or
and there's a lot of that. And I know
We do that a lot.
Yeah.
Tricky blues or anything.
Yeah, wallpaper, doing like a run where we sort of, you know, do a bespoke colourway on it.
And why would you do that with all these wallpapers out there? Why would you?
I
It's
find
never
wallpaper
quite the right
really
shade.
difficult. yeah. I do find wallpaper quite difficult to find lovely stuff. I mean, I think that's an interesting one with the pattern question, because, you know, there are some patterns that are beautiful and you think could make a great wallpaper, but actually layering anything over the top of it is very difficult. And sometimes quite a simple, rather underwhelming design actually works well as a wallpaper because it's easy to mix things. But I think there's room in the world for a few more wallpapers. Yeah, so that there's a lovely guy who we work with called Hugh Dunford-Wood who blocks everything to order, and so anything that you get from him, you sort of ask for the colours that you want.
But it's a good point about the wallpaper. Slightly needs to be a little bit boring, unless it's going to take over the room.
Yeah.
And a lot of the wallpaper designs are so incredible, but they're very selfish.
It's quite loud.
They're just sort of, you know, and then you really would
And
have
then
to
what
have
do
a
you do
pattern loud scheme, and that's not somewhere you would want to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Maybe a spare bedroom?
Or a loo.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of loos have amazing
Yeah, I have a bit of a
wallpapers.
bugbear about kind of loo, strong
The loo
wallpapers and
paper.
Yeah.
I always have very boring loos. Can't have a wallpaper in a loo. What else was good? So, Nicola, I'm going to do this in turn for you to describe one of your most successful rooms.
Well, I think that's actually really hard to answer. I think the rooms that I personally enjoy the most are rooms where maybe kind of slightly fudged the blurred what it's being used for. So, you know, a kitchen that's got some soft seating in it, you know, a study that's got, you know, a drinks trolley in it.
That you've made it work hard in a way. That
and kind of stretched its use, and maybe that makes it a little bit unexpected. There's an element of surprise about it having that extra activity.
And in terms of decoration, are there particular rooms that have really, when they've come together, you've been particularly kind of excited about? I mean, probably always excited. You know, the whole it's a house as a whole, maybe, but
Yeah, I mean, it's probably like children, sort of equally sort of exciting and terrifying all at once, and hard to choose between them.
Yeah.
I don't think I could name a favourite room.
No.
I don't know, could you?
I think your velvet.
I was going to say there's a room coming up on this thing that I did that happened by accident, because obviously I was going to. It was a dining room that had been a garage, and I thought a way of dealing with it would be to panel it, and obviously lacquer it.
Obviously.
But when it came to it, we did 7 or 8 different colours, and we just couldn't. The client was fantastic. She was like, none of this is working. So I took there's a very nice sort of French cotton velvet that we like to use, and the really strange colours, weird in-between colours.
Oh, sounds good.
Later. And I took this book to show her because we thought it might be a good colour inspiration. And she said, why don't we just wrap the panelling in velvet, which is such a sort of mad and extravagant such a mad, extravagant thing to do. And it ended up being really complicated, but it sounds amazing.
Yeah, and brilliant for the sound of a dining room.
When you're in there having a quiet, kipper, cup of tea, having your breakfast, it's very reassuringly quiet.
And that's how you get originality.
No, that is exactly how you do
It's
it. Not
on our own, but with the client.
Absolutely.
A conversation,
Yeah.
and it's evolved.
The best thing.
It's
is-
so exciting,
Yeah, it
isn't
is.
it?
It's like that little bit of alchemy.
Yeah.
Is so vital and so much about what it's the joy of
About.
it.
Yeah. Learning and unexpected. Yeah.
And creating something with someone else that you could never have done on your own.
Yeah, completely.
But how do you don't know that when you take on a client, do you? How do you work that
No.
out? That you're going to have those sort of conversations?
You don't.
You
No.
don't, and it can be. It's a very unexpected thing in the way that all relationships have their own kind of meander. But when there's good chemistry, it's like the best thing.
And it can be very surprising, come from unexpected places, can't
Yeah.
it? You kind of think it's going to go one way, and then someone will really surprise you. And I think it's letting it follow that course.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's very quick, and sometimes it takes a really long
A
time.
couple of houses in, sometimes even.
Yes.
So
People
just
get their confidence.
yes.
And,
then
have,
it's
and being
patience.
having the confidence to be
Yeah.
open-minded, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Under patience with yourself,
Yeah.
you have to be patient with yourself as well.
And what about you, Lucy? Do you have a room?
I think the rooms that I can think of that I love the most are the ones that the clients seem to be the happiest and seem to be who they thought they wanted to be,
Yeah.
or who they are, but didn't necessarily feel like they were able to be in in another room. That's the sort of professional. So selfishly, I like the rooms where I'm allowed to do whatever I want to. We'll just be really artistic. We did a project where the walls have got like a tent all over, with the stripes everywhere, and it's amazing.
And that came from you, rather.
That was conversation again. No,
Yeah.
I mean it was the client, it was the specialist painter, it was me, but it's just comes together, and the client trusting that to go for it was amazing, and she's so pleased.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's
Yes.
the magic, isn't it? And I think you're so right when it really fits the person and they can live the life they sort of want to live, then and that's where you can use the sort of toolkit of interior design to bring these fantasies to life that maybe they didn't even know were there until you've had those conversations.
Yeah.
And
actually, going back to the title of this talk, in a way, the idea of creating a harmonious interior, critical to that is the sort of harmony with your client, isn't it? And kind of making it a happy place for them that feels right for them.
And understanding what it is how people want to live, because people, until they start having these conversations with you or with themselves, wouldn't really have thought about it or known what they want or how they want to live.
Yeah.
what's possible,
And I was just thinking, somebody asked me the other day whether I always do I like every house we feature in the magazine? And I said no. I mean, if it was every house that was perfectly suited to me, it would be a pretty boring magazine. But I can kind of appreciate. I hope that every house, even some of them, I possibly don't even really like it. I don't like at all. That's the wrong words. But I can totally appreciate why what they're doing and why they are like they are, and that's why they're in the magazine. But do you have that when you're creating rooms? That sometimes you're creating rooms that you definitely wouldn't want to be in.
People with extraordinary taste that is not. It's really unusual.
Yeah. So you wouldn't want to be in it, but you can still admire
I
it.
really don't like being in that room, but she's extremely happy with it. I mean, it slightly looks like a Christmas tree, and it's just it's not for me, and it's not for very many people. But she couldn't.
Could it feature in House and
happier.
Garden?
I think it definitely has to now, doesn't it?
Front cover.
But it's good, it's a good room. Everything fits. It's fit for purpose. It's comfortable for what she needs it for, and they love it.
Yeah.
So, but it's awful.
No. But I suppose yes. I'm kind of meaning. I suppose also whether your own taste is being pushed by your client, isn't it? Kind of. Yeah.
I mean, it's a constant back and forth. We're working for somebody at the moment who's fantastic, but he's very full on and very involved and in a rush.
Yeah.
And
Worse.
That's awful.
I mean, so am I.
Yeah.
Because we've got a definite sort of date to get towards, but there's a lot of emails at sort of 11:30 at night with things that I wouldn't normally want to work with, and things that he really feels a real attachment to, and I don't have to live that.
Yeah.
I'm very happy to.
But you will be pleased with the result at the end.
Yes, absolutely delighted. A project where everyone's happy and everyone's finished, and we can all go home in the evening and sleep well is a great result, I think. It matters.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, everybody. I hope this has been kind of enlightening and kind of reassuring in lots of ways. For me, as I'm doing my own project and getting kind of all sorts of kind of, confidence issues and all sorts of things. But it's kind of it's great to listen to you all talking about your processes. And thank you very much. And I'll hand back to Becky, I think.
Well, I don't know about you, but I was making lots of notes. I always make lots of notes in these wonderful sessions. It really was brilliant. And I feel that we've really heard some fantastic ideas and some amazing inspirations. Just a few words that I jotted down: serendipity, confidence, trust, conversations with clients and specialists, originality, choose the things you love, add elements of surprise. I really want to go to that velvet wrap dining room. And choose lovely, happy places that your clients are going to be happy to be in. They really are. These are world-class talent we've got on our stage today, and it's been such a privilege, and they really do create magical interiors. Thank you so much for joining us.